recent graduate of the MIAP program Dan was referring to at New York University. And together with Jonathan, Carolyn, and Taylor, who you were here from after me, we worked on the Navy collection at the Museo del Cine. Working at the museum allowed us the opportunity to work with the wonderful staff there, in particular Carolyn Kappa, who was the archivist working most closely with the Navy collection, and over our time in Apex, collaborating and exchanging ideas with Carolina was a fantastic opportunity. I know I'm speaking for everyone when I say that. So the Navy collection. The collection was deposited at the Museo by the Argentine Navy in 1994. It is still on deposit at the Museo because the Navy has not formally donated it to the Museo. The collection arrived with no inventory or cataloging to be noted. It consists of approximately 1,000 cans of film in both 35mm and 16mm formats on both nitrate and acetate stock. The majority of those, though, are on acetate. And the films date mostly from the 1930s to the 1970s. The first attempt to gather some sort of intellectual control over this collection came in 2009 with the Apex visit to Museo del Cine that Dan was referring to earlier. They did not particularly number cans, but made recommendations on how to preserve the collection and did a lot of inspecting of film and things of that sort. Following that, several years later, Carolina made an intervention into the collection and numbered and inventoried approximately 62 cans of film. Our goal at the Museo while we were there was to further this inventorying while coming up with a suggested workflow and general recommendations for the preservation of the collection. To that end, our day-to-day task consisted of numbering film cans, opening film cans, many of which were very rusty and required a certain level of patience and persistence to open, inspecting the films for minor repairs if needed, winding and placing the films onto cores if it was needed, identifying films with the titles and years if possible, separating films that were either nitrate or showing symptoms of vinegar syndrome, compiling all our information into an Excel spreadsheet that's on the computers at the museum, which is serving as the inventory as of now, and then recording the new locations of the films and placing them back into their respective deposit rooms. So during our time at the Museo during Apex, we completed about 134 cans of film, which many times these cans would have multiple films within them. So that brings the total down to about 198, so roughly 800 more cans to go. Okay, so up next, you'll hear from my colleague Jonathan, and he's going to talk more about our workflow and some interesting content we have.
All right, thank you, Blake. I'm Jonathan Farbowitz. I'm also a student in the MIAP program. So this is just some images of, we have here Blake numbering the cans. We numbered them in bulk. After some, discussion over our workflow, we decided numbering them in bulk was the quickest way to go. And we have Caroline opening up one of the cans. And here's some inspection that we did. Particularly with the nitrate film, we wanted to do a full inspection of each film. And you can see here in the picture, that's me with the gloves taking apart the nitrate with a tool there. So this is, hopefully this is somewhat understandable. I made a flowchart of our workflow. Again, it was a little bit, the first few days we had some discussion with Carolina and among our team and decided the best way to go was to do a quick open a can, figure out, if it has vinegar syndrome, if it's nitrate. If it's vinegar syndrome, we did a very basic inspection, just trying to get, film gauge, is it 16 millimeters, is it 35, length, very basic details, is it negative, is it positive. If it was good enough, not degraded enough where we could take a look at it, then we would get more information like titles, potentially year, potentially producer or the director of the film. And then if it was nitrate, as I mentioned, we would do a more full inspection. And we were trying to, if we could, get them all off of reels and onto cores. And if the can was in very bad condition, we would recan. Although generally, I think very few films were recanned due to the fact that there weren't that many 16 millimeter film cans available. And then we returned our films to the appropriate vaults. So nitrate went in the nitrate vault. We created an area to store the films that had vinegar syndrome. So those are separated from the rest of the Navy collection in a larger vault, which will provide a little bit more like airflow. And that's pretty much our workflow. Oh yes, and Blake mentioned the Excel spreadsheet. We would enter data into that after we were done looking at the film. So just a little bit on the content. Some of the nitrate is very interesting, very old, and we saw footage of the Sarmiento, which was an important training ship for the Navy. So you can see there on the left some early footage of sailors on the Sarmiento. There was another nitrate film that was sort of almost like a Navy travel log, and you can see different countries like Panama, Algeria, Cuba, and Spain. There was even footage of on this travelogue film, there was even footage of the bullfight. And then majority of the collection were films that were produced by the US Navy. And many of these we found with one reel with image and sound, and then another reel with negative optical sound. And we later discovered that the first reel with the image and sound was actually in English. So this was basically, U.S. Navy instructional film. Often they were about things like batteries or lifeboats or refining gasoline. And then the optical negative would be in Spanish. So I guess this was for the Navy to be able to strike prints with a Spanish soundtrack. But we also found some ideological films, anti-communist films, and one of the ones here, which we're not sure whether this is an Argentine production or American production, but Represión de los Motines, another ideological film. So now now Taylor's gonna talk about some of the deterioration we encountered.
I'm going to stand up. My name is Taylor Whitney. I'm the president and founder of Preserving the Past, which is a company that I founded in 1997, and we have offices in Los Angeles and Rochester, New York, specializing in photographic and film preservation for private collections. And I'm honored to be on this program and to be working with all of my teammates and colleagues. Some of this information I'll be giving you is a little bit redundant because most of you work in film preservation, but I thought a basic explanation of what we've been dealing with was important. On the left here is an example of our storage conditions and talking about the rusty cans that we dealt with that Blake spoke about. I mean, a lot of times we had to use a screwdriver and a hammer to just get the can open because they were so rusted shut. And then, speaking of vinegar syndrome, which is the molecular decomposition of the acetate base, And this is an example of some sort of moderate vinegar syndrome that causes the film to get brittle and to shrink, and in some cases for the emulsion to pull away from the acetate. And the obvious damage is that it's hard to project, which is a problem, as we all know. And it causes the shrinking of the acetate base causes the shrinking of the sprockets in the whole film, so that it is dangerous to project and can cause further damage. Each can that we opened, it seemed to have just a variety of issues. There were some, like the previous one, that had vinegar syndrome, and this one that had like some oozing and some rust around the edges. And some of the cans on the inside were just fine, so we didn't have to recan them, and other ones were rusted on the inside. And there just seemed to be no rhyme or reason on why the storage conditions or the history of the film or the film stock on why what was deteriorated and what wasn't as deteriorated. We got other signs of mold and mildew. There were some that were like so much mold, it was just all powdery white. And some that was like what we call hockey puck, so it's so hard that it's frozen, it's crystallized, and you can't even unwind it. This is our most extreme example. We were lucky enough to find this film that was oozing this sort of gel. It had like a black liquid gook, I think somebody called it, in the bottom of the can. And Valeria, who was working with us quite a lot, just jumped right in with her gloves and pulled a film that was stuck to the bottom of the can. It was just literally just gook. And we're going to continue doing some research to see like if there's anybody else in the film industry, film preservation industry, that happens to have had any experience like this. It's just so amazingly like, look. Interestingly, no matter how much vinegar syndrome we found, we would open a can that might take a screwdriver to get open, but then the inside of the can is pristine and the film is pristine. There's no evidence of vinegar syndrome. It's in beautiful condition. And it's like, why is one like the previous slide and another one like this in the same collection from approximately the same time? So I thought that was pretty fascinating when I'd open a can that was so rusted shut, and then it just was like this beautiful condition. So we'll have time for questions after if anybody has any questions on that, and I'll turn it over to Carolina for what we're going to recommend to the museum. Thank you.
First, we wanted to acknowledge the hard work and dedication that the museum has already put into the collection, and in prolonging the existence of these very important historical images. Our recommendations for this collection are to back up existing inventories and practice the periodical backup of spreadsheets, to start thinking about saving these spreadsheets on external hard drives in case they might, in case of any damage to the computers. Pool resources between collections in the museum to create a makeshift telecine with a 16mm projector and a DSLR camera to create reference copies to disperse to historians or interested persons who might start thinking about writing about the collection and the importance of the collection to Argentina. Finish the inventory of the collection and discard materials with advanced deterioration, and use AD strips when in doubt of the severity of the condition of the materials. With that, muchas gracias.